In 1993, my uncle was living in an underground room on my farm. One night I came home and instantly knew something was wrong. The entire property had gone silent at the same time, and whatever caused that silence started in the room where he stayed. Back in 1993, my uncle came to stay with me. We were never close. I didn't hate him, but I didn't like him either. He was one of those people who always seemed to make the worst possible decisions and then acted surprised when everything fell apart. Not a criminal, not violent, just selfish, unreliable, and very hard to be around. On top of that, he had something going on mentally. Nobody in the family ever got a clear diagnosis for him. Sometimes he'd talk to himself, or stare at a wall too long, or get fixated on strange ideas. At that time, I was working as a sheriff. My shifts were long and my hours were all over the place. Some nights I'd come home just before sunrise. Sometimes not at all if there was something big going on. I lived out on a farm outside a small town, and I didn't really like the idea of the property being empty at night. So when my uncle showed up on my doorstep looking worn out and desperate, part of me was annoyed, but another part of me saw an opportunity. I needed someone on the property overnight, and he needed a place to stay. It wasn't a warm, loving decision. It was practical. I told him he could live in the underground service room behind my barn. It wasn't nice. It was an old concrete room with a metal hatch, some pipes, shelves with tools, and a cot I dragged down there. It was messy and a bit damp, but it was sheltered, livable. I made one thing very clear. The main house was off limits. He could use the outside tap, I'd bring him food, but he was not to come into my home. He agreed. Maybe because he had no other choice. Maybe because he knew I meant it. For 3 years, that's how it went. He stayed down there. He ate down there. He slept down there. I'd see him in passing sometimes when I brought food or checked on the pipes. He always looked tired, but he was never aggressive or anything like that. Mostly he kept out of my way, which suited me fine. Sometimes days would go by where I barely remembered he was on my land at all. He was sick, but he was alive. The farm was fine. And at the time, that was enough for me. Then one night everything changed. It was a weekday night. I remember that much. I got off shift earlier than usual, sometime around 1 a.m. The drive home was uneventful. No storms, no heavy fog, nothing like that. Just a quiet, cold night. I pulled into the yard and immediately noticed the sound, or rather, the lack of it. When you live with animals, you get used to a certain background noise. Even at night, there's always some shifting, a snort, a hoof scraping, the dog padding around. Sleep has a sound. This was not that. This was complete silence. No movement from the barn. No low sounds from the cows. That put me on edge right away. Normally, my dog runs out when my truck pulls in. He knows the sound of the engine. He comes trotting up, tail going, wanting attention. That night he didn't. I had to look for him. I found him under the porch steps. He was pressed back into the corner, shaking. Not like he was cold, like he was scared. His head was low, his ears were down, and he was staring in one direction, toward the barn and the ground near it. The first thing that went through my head was, something's wrong. There's something out there. My practical side kicked in after that. We get wild animals sometimes. Coyotes, stray dogs, a bear once in a while. I thought, maybe a bear came through and spooked everyone. I grabbed my flashlight and my gun. I always say this when I tell the story. The gun was mostly for noise. I don't like shooting animals if I can avoid it. Usually a couple of loud shots in the air are enough to send anything running. I walked toward the barn, listening. The yard itself was quiet. No branches moving, no wind, just that heavy, eerie quiet. I checked the barn first. The animals were all standing up, which is unusual at that hour, but they weren't moving much. They were just stiff, the kind of stiff that comes with fear. Their ears were angled toward the ground outside, and their breathing sounded wrong. Too fast, too shallow. Something was off, but I still didn't see anything. I stepped back outside, turned in a slow circle with the flashlight beam. That's when I heard it. Metal on metal. A deep, jarring sound from underground. The hatch. The underground service room. The metal hatch was rattling. Not just vibrating a little, but jerking, like somebody inside was hitting it hard. Up until then, my uncle had never done anything like that in 3 years. He'd never banged, never yelled, never tried to force his way out. He always treated that space like it was his room. I hurried over and shined the light on the hatch. It was jumping slightly with each hit. My first thought was, he's having a medical emergency. Maybe he fell. Maybe he's in pain. I opened the latch and lifted the hatch slowly, half expecting it to fly open. It didn't. It just lifted normally. The room was dim, lit by a small bulb on the wall. I played the flashlight inside and saw him in the far corner. He wasn't standing by the ladder. He wasn't on the cot. He was pressed as far as he could physically get into one corner of that room. Knees pulled up, back flattened against the wall, eyes wide. His skin was gray, sweaty, and his chest was rising and falling too fast. He looked like he'd been terrified for hours. I said his name, asked what was going on. He looked at me, and in a strained, shaky voice he said, "Don't let it in. Don't open the back door. Please, please don't." The words didn't make sense right away. "Back door?" "There is no back door," I said. "You know that. It's a concrete room. 3 solid walls and the hatch. That's it." He shook his head, almost violently, and pointed a shaking finger past me. "There is now," he said. There was something about the way he said it that made my stomach knot up. I turned around with the flashlight. The back wall, which had always been solid concrete, had changed. A long, jagged vertical crack ran down it, starting around waist height and going all the way to the floor. At first glance, you might think it was just a normal foundation crack, but the more I looked, the more it didn't feel that way. It was wider in the middle, wide enough that I could have slid 2 fingers into it. The concrete around it looked fresh, almost like it had been forced inward. I stepped closer without really meaning to. I remember thinking, has this been here the whole time? Did I just never notice? But I'd been in that room so many times. I knew those walls. I'd painted one of them myself years before. This wasn't normal aging. It looked new. Behind me, my uncle started crying quietly. Not hysterical screaming, just this broken, tired crying, like something inside him had finally given up. "It was talking to me," he said, "through the vents, through the pipes, every night. I didn't answer it. I swear I didn't answer." My first instinct was to think, he's having a psychotic episode. We all knew he had mental issues. I'd seen him talk to himself before. But this felt different. The fear on his face didn't look like the kind you can fake or even imagine. It looked like he had been worn down day by day. I opened my mouth to tell him we needed to go to the hospital, and that's when I heard it. A sound from inside the crack. It was faint at first. A slow, scraping slide, like stone against stone or something hard dragging along concrete. Not a rat, not pipes settling. Heavier than that. It moved upward slightly, then down again, then stopped. Every hair on my arms stood up. I took a step back from the wall. Inside my head, everything was firing at once. Is this some kind of structural failure? Is the ground shifting? Did something cave in behind the wall? Is this gas? Is it safe to even be down here? I didn't wait for a second hit. I crossed the room, grabbed him under the arms, and pulled. He wasn't a big man, but dead weight like that is hard to move. He fought me at first because he was so scared of the hatch too, but I kept repeating, "We have to go. We have to go. We are not staying down here. Come on." My uncle was breathing hard, holding his chest. He looked worse than before. I thought at first it was just the fear, but then he said in a small voice, "It hurts. My chest hurts." That was a different kind of fear for me. That was a practical fear. I knew what chest pain could mean, especially at his age and condition. I got him into the truck and drove straight to the hospital. The whole way there, I was trying to get him to talk to me, to explain more. I wanted him to keep talking so I could tell what was happening with his mind, with his body. He didn't say a word. Not one. He just stared straight ahead, holding his chest with one hand, breathing shallow. His eyes weren't wild anymore. They were just empty. He didn't make it to the next morning. The doctors gave me technical reasons: heart failure, stress, a combination of his past health, his mental state, his age, and who knows what else. Medically, it wasn't shocking. Nobody wrote anything strange in the report. They didn't know about the crack or the sounds or any of it, and I didn't tell them. After he died, I went back to the farm and straight to the hatch. I told myself I was going to prove that it was all in his head, that there was some simple explanation. Maybe the wall had cracked years ago and I never noticed. Maybe he imagined the sounds and worked himself into a heart attack. I opened the hatch and climbed down. The room looked the same as always. The cot, the pipes, the shelves, a few things he'd left scattered around. I stood there for a long time, long enough that my legs got tired. I just stared at that section of wall, trying to force my brain to come up with something reasonable. It didn't. In the end, I sealed the room myself. Not because I saw something again, not because I heard anything, but because even being down there alone made me feel sick. I poured extra cement along the inside of that back wall. I blocked the vents. I shut the hatch and secured it. And I never used that room again. I didn't tell the department, didn't tell neighbors, didn't tell family. On paper, my uncle died of health problems after years of bad living and mental instability. That's what everyone knows. That's what they accept. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. I know this. I didn't treat him well. I didn't beat him. I didn't hurt him. But I put him underground because it was easier for me than really dealing with him. I kept him out of my house, out of my life, and as long as he was breathing and my land was watched, I was satisfied. It took his death, and that night, to really hit me. He came to me because he had no one else, and I stuck him in a concrete box. Now I'm getting old myself. I think about that a lot. I remember his face in that corner, begging me not to open something I couldn't even see properly. I don't know if what happened to him was all in his head, or if there was something else down there that we'll never understand. But I do know, in my heart, that I failed him. And I just hope that when I'm in my 80s, scared and confused, someone doesn't decide that the easiest place for me is somewhere out of sight, underground, where my fear is nobody's problem but my own. If you want more stories from out here, you can subscribe. And thank you for giving me the chance to tell you another one.